Hey guys, and welcome back to the ASX Investor channel. Very excited to be bringing to you all a special interview today. Today, we're going to be deep diving in and exploring all things biotech. We know it's a fascinating sector that attracts a lot of investor interest, and we're really grateful to be joined by one of the preeminent and really renowned biotechnology entrepreneurs, investors, chairmen, and CEOs who's worn many hats across the ASX and global companies, Paul Hopper. Paul, it is an absolute pleasure to have you join us. We know you've got involvement in a range of different companies and looking forward to unpacking those stories, as well as discussing the broader biotech space. Welcome to the channel, mate.
Thank you for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. Of course, we had that first discussion previously, which we'll definitely link after this, so investors can go and check that one out. But maybe just as a bit of a refresher, you're the executive chairman of a number of companies, Imugene, that many of the investors are familiar with, Chimeric, as well as Arovella. You've recently IPO'd Radiopharm. Can you just give that overview about who you are, a bit of your background, and how you've come to where you are today?
Sure. So I have executive roles at 3 out of 4 of those companies. I've been involved in the biotech industry since about 2003. I was in the private hospital field before that. Imugene, I started in 2013, which I think, as you know, has now grown to the largest biotech in the country. Chimeric, I floated on the ASX in January this year. That's a cell therapy company that's working in CAR T and NK cells. Radiopharm is a radiopharmaceutical business, nuclear medicine, that I floated in November. And Arovella, I'm the chairman of, and that's a company that's expanding its portfolio into the NK and cell therapy area.
I'd love to know your thought process. You really are just kind of exploring and trying to find some of these next generation technologies that can make a difference in a range of different fields. Can you think about how you get to this stage and why you've identified some of the technologies that you've brought out across these 4 companies?
Right. So I lived in the States for 11 or so years, and I got to know all the tech transfer offices of most of the major universities and hospital systems in the US. So they basically, when the technologies get to a certain state within those institutions, they tend to want to license them out to companies who will raise the money and develop the drugs commercially. So I get to see a lot of deals. So people send me stuff all the time. I stay in touch with the places that I've had dealings with in the past, like the Yales, the City of Hopes, the Moffitt Cancer Centers, and I just keep my eyes open for what I think is interesting. I'm largely in the therapeutic drug area, mainly cancer or oncology. So I do see deals, and I see a lot of them, but like most things in life, most of them aren't starters, and so you have to look out for the sort of the nuggets that stand out.
And just as a bit of a framework for our discussion, are you able to give that summary of, I guess, biotech to you, what it really means? And then also, we know there is a bit of a delineation from biotech, that early stage development of the treatments or whatever the solutions are. And then, of course, big pharma, really taking it from phase 3 and then focusing on that commercialization side. Can you just give that summary to investors as that overview before we explore?
Yeah, so look, for me, it's one of the most exciting areas to be in. I don't consider this work, I think I said it to you last time, you work with the most incredibly smart people who are really doing cutting edge stuff. And just imagine if one of these drugs actually gets approved. I mean, it's transformational for patients and for humankind. Obviously, the people that put the money up, that is our investors, they make a lot of money and that's great, but there's nothing very much like that out there, in terms of a profession or a career. So for me, I don't see it as work. I think it's very inspirational, and many of the scientists that I work with have become friends of mine. So that's my motivation.
And I guess there were so many different places we could have started this with, so many different plates to discuss. But I guess that first one, most recent one, Radiopharm Theranostics, it's just come to market, playing that nuclear medicine space. Can you give that overview about what it is, the opportunity that you're trying to play into, and how things are progressing since you've IPO'd?
Yeah, so the nuclear medicine space has been around for years. So the part where you take pictures of organs that are lit up, that's been a pillar of medicine. The idea that you could possibly then use radioactive isotopes to actually cure cancer or treat cancer, although it's been around a long time, there hadn't been that many great advances. But in the last 5 years, there has been. So it's an exciting sector. And Telix has been an extraordinary success down here in Australia, listed 4 years ago. It's now a $2 billion company. That sort of got me thinking about it. And then the more I dived into it, the more I realized that there was an enormous opportunity. There's a lot of big pharma interest. There's a lot of mergers and acquisitions in it. There were a lot of IPOs and a lot of capital raisings. And I thought, that looks pretty interesting. And when I started to inquire, I found some interesting assets and I met some interesting people who had a firm belief that there's plenty of room for another company. And so I pulled everyone together and the assets together and we floated. We had a disappointing IPO in terms of the price. It wasn't disappointing in the lead up because I had a convertible note before that was oversubscribed to blazes. And then the actual IPO itself was also oversubscribed. So, it was something like 100 million and we only raised 50. But we went into a perfect storm in a sense that, maybe we should have been listing a month earlier, but it went down. I mean, we think the company's in even better shape since we listed the company, but we've been subject to a lot of selling. But my job is to restore the value back to the 60 cents as fast as myself and the team can do, and take it on beyond that, because at the moment it's got a market cap of about 80 million. It's got a whole pile of money in it for incredibly good assets and a world-class management team. So I think it's got a lot of potential.
And as you mentioned, there is an absolutely stacked pipeline with a range of different moves forward into the clinic. I know you sent out a note actually last Friday. Are you able to just give a bit of an insight into what that note said and what are those key growth drivers that investors should look forward to moving forward now?
Well, look, I sent it out because I wanted to reassure people when you do an IPO at 60 cents and it drops a lot, people obviously scratching their heads wondering what happened. And I wanted to reassure them the company was in great shape. The day after the IPO, I went to London and met the whole management team. We had 3 days strategic planning. It was an incredibly good meeting. I updated all the trial status, so we had more patients admitted to the studies since we had been listed. And the feeling around the room was very positive. So I just wanted to reassure investors that all was well. We were staying the course, and the team is very committed. In fact, all the team bought stock after the IPO themselves on market. So that's a pretty good statement of confidence.
And then moving forward into 2022, there's a range of different treatments, both at phase 2 and phase 1 level. What should investors be watching forward to out of that pipeline?
Yeah, sure. So we have, as you mentioned, we've got a lot of studies. We've got 7 studies, which I think would probably give us about the deepest clinical trial program on the ASX. I can't say categorically we are, but if we're not, we must be only the second or third largest in terms of trial. I mean, 7 clinical trials is a lot of trials. So what you should be looking for is the ones that are moving into the therapeutic area. So we have a breast cancer imaging, a HER2 breast cancer imaging study, which is just finishing up. It's had about 45 people on it, and we'll be planning to take that to an FDA-approved IND in the new year. So we would hope to get that study starting to recruit, not only in the US, but possibly in Australia. We're talking to some people in Australia. So that's a very interesting one because HER2 positive breast cancer is a very big market.
Yeah, it's a pretty fascinating pipeline. So I think a bit of a change of pace. Talking about the CAR T side as well, we know that, of course, Chimeric has got exposure to that, but Imugene's playing at the intersection of CAR Ts, these really innovative cell therapies. Of course, the focus at this stage is there's approved CAR Ts, but they focus on the blood cancer side. We'd love to hear your thoughts about how you're focusing on transitioning those to solid cancers and why it's such a big opportunity as well.
Right. So CAR Ts, as you say, are T cells taken from the patient's blood and re-engineered to make them like a guided missile against the specific cancer that you're trying to treat. They only work to date in blood cancers, liquid tumours. The holy grail is to find a CAR T that will work against a solid tumour. So in the 2 companies you mentioned, Imugene has a virolytic, an oncolytic virus, which turns solid tumours or makes them visible to a CAR T. And that program is called Oncarlytics, and they're working on using the virus. So Imugene is not actually a cell therapy company. Their virus is a technology which enhances CAR T. So it needs to find a CAR T and work in conjunction with that. In the case of Chimeric, we've actually got a CAR T that we believe can work in solid tumours, and we're in a phase 1 clinical trial at the City of Hope in glioblastoma or brain cancer. And we're moving through that study at the moment.
Yeah, and I think it's quite remarkable. If I'm right, there's been 5 approved CAR Ts globally, and I believe that the team that you've assembled at Chimeric has been involved in the development of 4 of them. Is that right? Can you talk about the actual team itself and why you've assembled the team and that opportunity that you're really looking to feed into moving forward with them?
Yeah, so probably the most successful CAR T company in the world is a company called Kite, NASDAQ. Well, it's not NASDAQ because it got taken over, but the chief commercial person there, a lady called Jennifer Chow, I heard might be interested in what we were doing. And I was able to recruit her as the CEO, and she's been absolutely outstanding. And the rest of the team come from industry leaders in cell therapy like Celgene and Bristol Myers. So I do have an outstanding team, there's no question. And they're all US based. They've worked on all the major CAR T approvals. So there's not much they don't know about developing CAR T drugs. So I'm pretty, the leadership is in very safe hands.
And then in terms of that 2022 focus to brain cancers in the clinic, and then there's one more treatment currently in the lab, and is that moving to progress towards the clinic over the next year?
Yes, so we're going to try and finish up the phase 1 at City of Hope next year. And then we've licensed technology from UPenn, which is a very famous, in fact, people might argue the pioneering center in the world for cell therapy, particularly CAR T. And we're working to take that piece of technology into a phase 1 next year as well.
Arovella Therapeutics, a bit of a new name, a bit of a new focus. There's another technology that's been brought in, formerly Suda Pharmaceuticals. Can you talk about ASX ALA and how that transition's really been evolving over this past period?
Right, so Arovella was previously, I guess you would describe it as a drug delivery company. That is, it was a way of enhancing the absorption of approved drugs into the system faster, often through the oromucosal membrane in the mouth. And we appointed a new CEO about 18 months ago who's done an outstanding job. But in fact, what the company has been doing is transitioning into other areas away from that oral delivery of drugs, and has been, successful in licensing from Imperial College, a very, very promising natural killer cell technology, which was announced some months ago. And then again, just yesterday, I think it was, the company, I'm the chairman of the company, not executive chairman, the company announced that it had licensed technology in the CAR T space from MD Anderson. So very, very exciting. 2 platforms on a tiny market cap, very good leadership under Dr. Michael Baker. He's done a brilliant job pulling it all together. He gets the science. He's had a commercial background in capital markets through a VC firm he worked at. And so I again feel he's ideal leadership for that little company, and we're hoping it won't be very little for very long.
Exciting times, and we'll continue to watch that development. I guess talking about things no longer being little in quite a fast time, it would be remiss of me not to ask the Imugene story. It's now worth $3 billion, as you've mentioned, the largest Australian biotech. I'd love just to ask initially your thoughts, your feelings from founding to the position it's in now, recently included into the ASX 200. How have you found the journey?
I started the company in 2013 and had a market cap of about 5 million. The early days were pretty tough. I remember we raised the first money at 3/4 of a cent. That's 0.75 or 0.075. And I think we raised 1.3 million, and we were pretty pleased with ourselves just getting started. And well, look, probably the first 4 years, we just kept, at it. It wasn't easy. And I think the turning point was probably at the end of 19 when we acquired the oncolytic virus from City of Hope, and then we'd acquired another piece of technology from Ohio State before that. And I guess the major change has been in the last year, because we've had good data out of the original technology. That's the B cell peptide technology, and that data has been very nice. And then to top it all off, in March or April this year, we were able to acquire an extension of the virus technology. And this was the virus, the oncolytic virus, that makes solid tumors visible to CAR T cells. which is, well, we haven't proved it yet, but the data suggests that it does. And that was pretty transformational. So it was a combination of that and the great results we have been getting out of the B-cell peptides. And I think it just caught the market's attention. And then we've done a whole bunch of deals because cell therapy is such a hot area, CAR Ts, that when people saw that we had this piece of technology that made solid tumors visible, they sort of stood up and waved at the CAR Ts, here we are, come and kill us. We got enormous interest from all across the industry about, tell us about it, should we do partnerships, and we've announced some of those, as you've seen. So, and that just pushed the stock through the $3 billion barrier. And of course, earlier this week or whenever it was announced that we're in the ASX 200. So it's been a phenomenal year, and I have to say, huge amount of the credit has to go to Leslie as the CEO. She's done a brilliant job. Tireless worker, works 8 days a week and crams it into 7. And she's been a great leader, and huge amount of the credit belongs to her for turning the company into what it is today.
Yeah, congratulations to yourself, Leslie, and the rest of the team. Truly flying the flag for Australian biotechs, and it'll be incredible to see what's up next. I'd love to know your thoughts on a personal level. There's so much going on. Talking about a stacked pipeline, Imugene definitely has one. What is it that really gets you most excited about 2022 with all of the different things happening at the Imugene story?
Look, Imugene, it would be getting some really nice data where we combine the oncolytic virus with a CAR T, and obviously that's an absolute priority. But in the meantime, we've got a breast cancer study that's recruiting at the moment using the virus. That's the preclinical data on that was absolutely brilliant. Obviously, we've been curing cancer in mice for years, and it's the translation to humans which is critical. But the data did look good, so that's very exciting. And then we have another study called our Vaccinia study, which we hope to get into the clinic next year. So we've got 4 INDs. I don't know many companies that have got 4 INDs in Australia. I mean, that's a serious pipeline. So Imugene is jam-packed with news and lots of exciting things happening. We're building out the team because we just, with so many programs, we need more people. But that there's any number of things that will keep me awake on Imugene next year, and I mean positively awake.
I'm sure investors are eagerly awaiting a lot of that as well. Of course, you mentioned 7 or 8 year journey with Imugene. Before that, you had Viralytics. You've got a depth of experience. I'd love just to hear some of your reflections on what you've really taken away over those past few journeys and what you're looking forward to implementing into some of the other companies as well.
Well, look, the thing I've learned that has really been rammed home to me in recent years is that after the technology, so you've got to have good technology and not recycled technology. I think you need novel, squeaky clean, bright and fresh technology in an area of great interest, whether it's cell therapy or radiopharmaceuticals. After that, the most important thing is the leadership team. It's absolutely critical. And the problem I found in Australia is because it's not a huge industry, biotech, and it's not an established asset class for the institutions quite yet. We don't have a huge body of management experience here. So I've recruited everyone from overseas. And, there is a bit, if you take the case of Chimeric and Imugene, or even Arovella, there is some cell therapy work that's going on down here, but it's not anywhere near as big as what happens in the US. So there's a much bigger pool of talent. So I would say one of the observations is you have to have people who have very specific domain experience in the area of the technology, and they have to have had commercial experience in developing the drugs, because purely academia is I don't think it gives you, enough experience commercially to be able to take it on. So in short, if you've got the right people, you've got a much better chance of getting there.
And we touched on it there as well, just the general state of the industry. It's obviously one that's moving so fast, so rapidly. We've seen how fast things have changed with the virus and the rollout of the vaccines. I'd love to know your thoughts on the state of the industry, both in Australia and globally, and also what you think is really exciting over the next decade and beyond for the broader biotech sector.
Yeah, so look, unfortunately, biotech at the moment is down, and I felt that on my IPO with Radiopharm 2 weeks ago. I think the US biotech index is down about 24% this year. You know, it had an incredibly hot run all last year. There's been a lot of IPOs, and maybe there's just been too many IPOs for the number of institutions that take them up. So a lot of it's gone to retail investors, and they're quite fickle. And the market down here for biotech now has definitely quietened down. It's nothing like it was back in January. So it's soft. If we go to JP Morgan in January, the big biotech conference, and there's some really good news, that might fire it up again, but it's probably going to be, you know, quiet for the next couple of months. You're seeing it in all the share prices in biotech at the moment. In terms of looking ahead, look, my plate's full. I'd be very unlikely to take anything more on at the moment. So for me, the focus is very much on the companies that I'm involved in and doing what I can to push them forward. So I do like radiopharmaceuticals and nuclear medicine, because it's an area where a lot of the big pharma companies have not yet gone. Some of them have. And I think the collective wisdom of the sector is it's not a question of if they will go into radiopharmaceuticals and nuclear medicine, just a question of when. So I think that's going to be a pretty exciting area.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Radiopharm is literally only one of, I think, 3 at the moment that's playing the nuclear medicine space on the ASX. We've covered a range of different companies today, obviously a broad discussion, but is there anything that you think investors might not have picked up on yet, or that you'd like to leave them with as they're thinking about the sector or some of the companies we've spoken about today, Paul?
Well, I mean, it's self-serving for me to tell everybody that my 4 companies are, you know, outstanding investments. I don't do that, but I think I've explained to you the merits of those companies. So I certainly, I'm very pleased to be part of them. There's no question about that. I think with biotech, what you need to do is take a close look at the management of the company and the boards. How relevant is their experience do they have domain experience? Have they developed drugs before? And remember that most biotechs are going to be black holes for capital, just by nature of what they are. They're always, the clinical trials are not cheap. Making a drug is not cheap. Doing all the preclinical safety work, it's not cheap. So, you know, you have to accept the fact that capital raisings are part and parcel of it. And of course, they're not, unless you happen to strike it lucky on an IPO and the stock comes out the gate at an enormous premium, you need to be more realistic about the returns. I mean, Imugene, yes, people have made a lot of money in the last year, but we've been at it for, you know, 7.5 years, and the early days were hard.
That is Paul Hopper. It was an absolute pleasure to have that discussion. If you guys did enjoy the video, don't forget to hit the like button. Feel free to share it out as well. We make daily videos, so if you haven't yet, make sure you've subscribed and turn your bell notifications on. The 4 companies discussed today were Imugene, ASX IMU, Chimeric, CHM, Radiopharm Theranostics, RAD, and then Arovella as well, ASX ALA. Paul, it's an absolute pleasure. I really enjoy having these discussions. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, and looking forward to catching up again sometime in the future, mate.
Thank you very much for having me.